Hi, I'm Phil Dixon, Fast Team Program Manager for the St. Louis District. Recently, we invited Al Gorthy and Tom Frakes from the FAA's Office of Runway Safety in Kansas City, Missouri, to come to Spirit of St. Louis Airport to offer their presentation of the taxi test. Prior to the presentation, Al and Tom handed out response cards to the audience participants so that we could instantaneously gauge their knowledge of runway safety. The results were interesting, and they offered Al the chance to make some corrections of some misunderstandings about procedures, markings, lighting, signage, and design. And now to present the taxi test, here's Al Gorthy.
We're going to ask you some questions tonight, and that's why those little response cards are in your hand. And it's going to be on the taxi test. It's going to be questions about taxi. And if you don't know the answer to it, you know there'll be an answer that comes up that says, I don't know. So go ahead and push that, because that's all right. That's okay. We'd like to know if you don't know. We really would. We'd like to know if you don't know, because then we know that we've got some more work to do. And don't be afraid about answering it wrong. You know, if you get it wrong, who knows? The only person that knows is you, because it's all anonymous. And we're not going to go around and check it or anything like that. Okay, so just have fun tonight. If you have questions, raise your hand. If you don't understand it, raise your hand and we'll talk about it, because we don't want anybody leaving this presentation tonight either confused about what you saw or confused about something that I said. Maybe about halfway through the presentation tonight, I'm going to show you 3 animations. And they're relatively new animations. I don't think you've seen them before. And they're all general aviation, I believe. So let's go ahead and get started with the Taxi Test 2013. You all have your little response cards in your hand, and I'm going to show you some questions that pop up, and the only thing you have to do is to punch the appropriate number that you think is the correct answer. If you punch a number and you change your mind, you can punch the number again before the poll closes. Now, we're not going to give you a minute or so, about 20 seconds to answer the questions. But I would really like everybody to answer the questions. So I don't know how many folks we have here. I'm thinking there's probably about 35 or so. So I should see about 35 responses. Okay. Now, here's the first question about the taxi test. At most towered airports, the lateral boundaries of the runway safety area are defined by what surface markings? The runway hold marking, the runway edge marking, or you're not sure? Go ahead and select your answer. Okay, we're going to have to explain this a little bit, because about half of you didn't get it right. It's called the runway hold marking. So let's take a look at what the lateral boundaries of the runway safety area, or let's take a look at what the entire runway safety area looks like. As you can see in this diagram, you've got the picture of the runway and the taxiways that are leading up to it, and then you have the runway holding position marking and the signs, and it defines the lateral boundaries. The boundary of the runway safety area typically is about 250 feet from either side of centerline and 1,000 feet from each end. What does the runway safety area do for you? Well, if you take a look at a major airport, like this is Kansas City International, and you take that red area and draw it over those runways, that's what the runway safety area at Kansas City International looks like. But what does it mean to you as you're taxiing up to the runway hold position marking? The runway hold position marking, remember, is the lateral boundary of the runway safety area. So if we would superimpose that red over the top of that, that's the beginning of the runway safety area. It offers not only incursion protection for you as you're making your approach here, if you're the pilot of this airplane landing on this runway down here. You can see that this Southwest jet is holding short and he has not penetrated the runway safety area. You can also see that these three aircraft that are taxiing up on the parallel taxiway are outside of the runway safety area, therefore offering you protection from any incursion. It also offers these guys and this Southwest airplane excursion protection from you in case you land and happen to have directional problems. You blow a tire, main landing gear, something of that nature. They give you an extra 250 feet here of lateral distance before you exit the runway safety area. So it offers not only incursion protection, but it also offers excursion protection. So that's kind of what the runway safety area looks like and how it's defined, the lateral boundaries. Okay, you have been issued taxi instructions by ground control to the active runway. What should you do when you come to this yellow marking? And here's the direction of taxi. You're coming this way. Okay, 66% of you said stop, 34% says continue your taxi. The correct answer is continue your taxi. And why would you want to continue your taxi? Because you already have your taxi clearance. You already have your taxi clearance. What is this marking here? Anybody want to tell me what that marking is?
Yes, it's the movement area.
Correct. It's the movement, non-movement area. So if you did not have your taxi clearance, you would have to stop at that line before penetrating into that area. So what do you do? What do you do? How do you make sure that you never make a mistake? Always obtain your taxi clearance before you move. If you do that, you'll always be assured that you'll never run into a problem crossing that line. Let's take a look at what it looks like from an overhead view. Here's your non-movement area boundary. It's that single yellow line with the dashed line. And as you can see, this green area here indicates that this non-movement area boundary line separates the ramp or the apron from the taxiway. And the taxiways are controlled by ground control. So that's why you have to get clearance from the ramp area into the taxiway area. And then as you get clearance into the taxiway area and you're under ground control, you come up to the hold short line, which controls the runway safety area under tower control. So does that make sense to everybody? So that's in every airport, every towered airport in the United States is basically this same way. 3 separate areas. There's the ramp, the apron area where you don't need any clearance. You move away from the ramp area into the taxiway areas. You're under ground control. You go from the taxiway into the runway environment, and now you're under tower control. That's how all that stuff works. And those lines are the demarcations of where you need to switch. Okay, what surface marking, A or B, requires ATC clearance to cross? Okay, well, we're going to have to talk about this one too. Correct answer is, it does depend on the direction of taxi. Why does it depend on the direction of taxi? Well, let's see, you're coming from the runway has got to be out here, so you're exiting the runway. Can you cross the dashed lines without clearance? Yes. Let's say you're taxiing this way and you come up to this movement, non-movement area boundary. Can you cross this way, going from right to left? Yes. Now let's go from left to right. Let's go from left to right. Do you need clearance to cross this?
Yes.
We just talked about that, didn't we? You need a clearance to penetrate into the taxiway area. And now we're into the taxiway area, which is here. Do we need clearance to get into the runway safety area? Yes. And that's under tower control. Okay, so if you get yourself confused, just think of the U.S. highway system. The markings on an airport are just like the U.S. highway system. If you're in this lane, can you cross and pass the guy that's ahead of you? Yes. If you're in this lane coming this direction, can you cross that line? Well, you could, but it would be illegal. Okay? So there's no difference. There's absolutely no difference on an airport. You can't cross that solid line unless you get a clearance from either ground control or tower. So just think about that. Where are you located? We should have 100% correct on this one. And everybody should respond. There we go. Who was the culprit? Get him on tape. Okay, you are in fact on Taxiway Bravo. Black square, you're there. That's how I remember it. Okay, black square, you're there. But let's look at this sign array, and let's look at it in an overhead view from Google. And that's what that looks like. It's a confusing intersection, as you can imagine. So as you're taxiing up here, you're on Taxiway Bravo right here, and you're coming up to an intersection of Taxiway Sierra, which runs 90 degrees to your path, and Taxiway Foxtrot, which is on a 45-degree path. So that's how you can kind of picture what this sign array means and how those taxiways are going to look. But obviously it's going to look a lot different than this sitting in your cockpit. What does this marking indicate? Okay, let's see what we say here. It indicates that you're approaching a hold line. Does anybody know what we call this? Enhanced Taxiway Centerline. This came into effect about 2 years ago, I believe. And it extends from the taxiway hold marking, it extends this way 150 feet. It's on either side of the taxiway yellow line. And that just gives you another indication. It kind of gives you a heads up that you're approaching a taxiway hold marking and you've got to stop. So it gives you 150 feet. Let's take a look at what this looks like from an overhead view. So here's your enhanced taxiway centerline extending out 150 feet, and there you have your runway position holding markings and surface painted hold signs. And there's your runway safety area. ATC instructs you to hold short. You must stop at which marking, A or B? Correct answer is B. You can cross that. We just talked about that. You can cross it because you can cross dashed lines, but you can't cross that solid line, can you? Has anybody ever seen this? Where would you see something like this? Let's take a look at where we would possibly see this. Parallel runways, or runways that have thresholds that are in close proximity to one another. So whenever you see this, just be careful that as you're landing here like this purple airplane has and he's cleared the runway, he can taxi across that hold marking, but he must stop and get clearance from who? Tower control. Because tower is controlling the runways. So tower is going to give you clearance to cross this runway, and then you'll enter into the taxiway complex. And so there's the two runway safety areas right there, and you are clear of both of those. What does hold short look like? No. Hold short looks like that. Because if you were holding short of the runway edge, you would be inside the runway safety area. You would be inside the runway safety area. Which sign, marking, and or lighting informs you that you are approaching a runway? All of the photos. Does anybody know what this is called? Has anybody ever seen that? If you haven't seen that, when we take a break for the pizza, go right out here and look right down there. You're going to see a flashing light. That's called the elevated runway guard light. Elevated runway guard lights are placed near the runway hold position marking, just as another indication that heads up you're approaching a runway. This one we've already discussed. It's the enhanced taxiway centerline. This marking is a surface painted hold sign. This is a runway holding position sign. This is a runway holding position marking. So let's take a look at what it looks like when they're all combined together. And there they are. How could you possibly miss this? How could you possibly taxi across this without clearance? The only way that you can do this is if you're not looking out. 150 feet prior to this, you're going to get this indication. You're going to get the flashing lights, possibly on both sides. You're going to get the red surface marking. You're going to get the red signs on either side, and then you're going to get the big surface painted. Lots of warning signs that you're approaching a runway and the runway safety area. You must stay out of that. At an airport with an operating control tower, you cannot cross this marking unless air traffic issues a clearance to do what? All of the above, that is correct. They've got to give you clearance to cross, clearance to take off, clearance to line up and wait, or to taxi onto the runway. Let me read this to you up here. You blew a tire on landing, you cleared the runway, and stopped on a taxiway. You informed Tower that you needed to get to the FBO for help. Tower responded with Roger. What does Roger mean? Roger means the tower received your transmission. That's the only thing it means. It doesn't mean that you can clear to get out of your airplane and walk anywhere. It just means that I understand that you blew your tire. After receiving the above clearance, you should read back the clearance and do what? Runway 18, taxi via Charlie. After you receive this clearance, you should read it back, and then what should you do? You're the airplane located right here. You should taxi via Charlie, hold short of the runway, and when ready, contact the tower. Are you confused that the tower did not give you holding instructions? Because you're expected to hold. Okay. You're the purple airplane, and your taxi clearance is along the blue line to runway 36. So you're coming down here, coming this way, across down to position D. So at what locations will air traffic issue you either a hold short instruction or a crossing clearance? Okay, let's take a look at this. If tower clears you to runway 36, are they going to have to hold you here or give you a crossing clearance? Someone says yes. The answer is yes. You cannot cross a runway. We just asked that question. You just asked that question. When you come to a runway, you have to get clearance to cross. So now you get clearance to cross runway 32 right. Now you're in kind of Neverland, which we already talked about. Now you come up to this hold marking. Now what are you supposed to do? You have to stop again, unless tower gives you clearance to cross. So you cross runway 32 left, and you come up to this hold marking. Now what are you supposed to do? Hold. Tower's got to give you clearance to cross. You come down here. Now what are you supposed to do? Hold. This is really important. Really important. Your taxi clearance is along the blue line to runway 36. So you have to hold at runway 36 at this point right here. You have to. And then when you're ready for takeoff, then you will get another clearance for departure. We're concerned about crossing clearances en route to your clearance limit, which was runway 36. Yes, sir.
Before you said that the tower has to clear you into the runway safety area, but if you're on a taxi, you're on ground the whole time until you get down.
Yes, you would probably remain on ground control all the way through here until you get to this point. And what ground control would probably do with tower at that time would coordinate the clearance to get you across that runway. So instead of having you switch frequencies back and forth 2 or 3 times, tower would coordinate that upstairs to keep you on one frequency, and the 2 guys talking to one another, 2 folks talking to one another up there would coordinate that to say, yes, get him across. This is really important. This is a change that took place about 2 years ago. So the important thing that we're trying to get you to learn here and to understand is that if you do come up to a runway, you have to get clearance to cross it. Stop and get clearance to cross it. The other thing that I want you to take away from this is that even if the runway is closed, you have to get clearance to cross it. So it doesn't matter whether the runway is open or closed or whatever. If you come up to a runway hold position marking and you're confused, stop and ask. Stop and ask. While taxiing at a towered airport, you come to this sign and marking, this sign and that marking. What should you do? Okay. You should proceed unless specifically instructed to stop by air traffic. This is the ILS hold marking, and let's take a look at what it looks like. Here's your ILS hold marking here, and here's your runway hold marking in this location, and here's your active runway. If ATC wants you to stop, they're going to ask you to hold at this particular point right here. Why? Because here is the ILS critical boundary area. This is the location of the antenna for the ILS. And it's going to protect aircraft that are coming in to land, that are using the ILS system. Because they don't want you to get up inside this critical area for signal interference. So that's why you would be requested to stop at an ILS hold position, because there may be another aircraft on an ILS approach utilizing this ILS equipment here, and they don't want you inside this boundary possibly interrupting the signal. So that's why they're going to give you the ILS hold. Now the only time that you have to stop is if tower tells you to stop. Okay? Yes?
This is probably, in my experience, this is probably the most misunderstood concept in this whole thing. I just wanted to point out that it's obvious from what you said, but there are these markings, for example, at Spirit at 4 o'clock in the morning when the tower is not operational. Those markings don't mean anything. And there are plenty of airports that are non-towered now. I don't know whether they were once towered airports and that's why they're there, but there are plenty of non-towered airports that have those. That's confusing, and the other thing that's confusing is the 802 is written in the AIM, giving us the idea that we ought to know something about 802 and respond.
Let's talk about that.
When that's really a controller instruction, that's when the controller is supposed to do that.
Let's talk about the 802 restriction, which is a little bit confusing. If the weather is 802, there's a good chance that this ILS system is going to be used. Good chance. I know, and we're going to talk about a towered airport now. We're going to talk about Spirit when the tower's open. So the weather's below 802. Good chance that this system's going to be utilized. If you're taxiing, there's a good chance that you're going to be asked to hold at this particular location if there's an airplane coming in that's utilizing this system. Okay, let's talk about non-towered operations, or when the tower is not open at Spirit. Now what do you do? There's nobody in the tower. The weather is 701. What do you do taxiing out?
Well, you got a remote frequency to call approach, and wouldn't they tell you to hold? They got to give you a release anyway.
Possibly.
I mean, that's one idea.
Okay. What about at a non-towered airport? How would you know at a non-towered airport that somebody's making an approach to this runway?
They turn the lights on.
Okay? So, if you're taxiing out at a non-towered airport, or at a towered airport when the tower's not operational, you still have some way of possibly knowing that there's somebody on approach, and then out of courtesy, you would hold there until this individual lands. That's confusing. There's no doubt about it. It takes some extra work on your part to do that. On an airport diagram, your ILS locations are going to be annotated on the airport diagram. Okay, you are holding short when a citation lands. Here's the citation, it's the green airplane. And ATC informs you to line up and wait. You're the purple airplane. What are you going to do? Okay, let's take a look at the responses here. Most of you said number 4, you're going to taxi onto the runway, you're going to hold, and you're going to await takeoff clearance. That is correct. What are some of the concerns that you should have when tower gives you a lineup and wait clearance? Number 1, why are they doing it?
Somebody's coming to.
There's a variety of reasons as to why they're doing that. If it's obvious to you, let's say that you're holding short and an airplane lands and they give you line up and wait, it's obvious why they're doing that. Because they have to get the airplane that has just landed off the runway and then they want to get you out of the way. But let's say the reason is not obvious to you and they tell you to line up and wait. Now, generally speaking, if it is not obvious to you, tower should tell you why they're lining you up and waiting. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, runway 36, line up and wait, crossing traffic 25. So I've either got landing traffic on 25 or aircraft are going to take off on 25, and that runway crosses my runway. As soon as that airplane takes off or lands and gets cleared, I can expect to go. So why do they want to put you on the runway? Why didn't they keep you just in the hold position?
Get you out there fast.
Saves time. Faster. Faster means what?
Traffic.
Traffic. So there's some traffic that is coming in to the runway that you're on. Correct? Why else would they put you on the runway? Okay? So now that you know that, you have to remember that tower makes mistakes. What happens if they forget you? How long are you going to wait until you say something to tower? 2 minutes?
Once the other planes clear of the runway.
Once the other airplanes clear the runway?
Just a reminder.
Okay. Anybody else? You know, there's no right or wrong answer here.
You feel uncomfortable, call.
Feel uncomfortable, start calling. Hair in the back of your neck. You know, how far can an airplane travel in 1 minute? A long way. So to me, you know, I'll give the guys maybe 30 seconds. And after 30 seconds, I'm going to get on the phone, on the horn, and I'm going to start asking questions. Tower, I'm still on runway 25. I know. Just checking. As soon as you click that microphone and tell tower that you're on runway 25, what does that do to the tower controller? It takes his eyes and swings them right over to 25, and they're looking right at you. Don't forget me. Okay, don't be intimidated by tower. Yes, sir.
I take my time to get in position and wait.
Okay.
How long can I sit there before the tower yells at me?
You know, this is a terrific segue into this animation. I think. Hold that thought, okay? Hold that thought.
Grand Forks Tower, Centurion 777 Juliet Kilo, with the inbound landing 35 left.
Centurion 777 Juliet Kilo, Grand Forks Tower. If you can turn it straight to the numbers, I'll put you in front of a Seminole on an 8-mile final.
Juliet Kilo, roger that.
Skyline 590, turn right taxiway Alpha 3, contact ground.
Alpha 3, contact ground, Skyline 590.
Shoe 7, number 2, runway 35 left, clear to stop and go.
Shoe 2, stop and go, 27.
Are both of these airplanes up the same frequency?
Grand Forks Tower, 2999, inbound, GPS, runway 35 left approach.
Sioux 909, Grand Forks Tower, hold short of the runway. Or correction, Sioux 909, Grand Forks Tower, report 3 DME.
Report 3 DME, Sioux 909.
Centurion 7 Juliet Kilo, follow the Cessna on base, right between you and the tower.
7 Juliet Kilo, roger.
Are they up the same frequency? Yes.
Kansas City is sort of that situation, but where the runways are close enough together so that the edge of the runway safety areas are not far enough apart to have an airplane.
That was just like this right here. What was this airplane going to do?
Test and go.
Stop and go.
Stop and go.
What does that mean? What does a stop and go mean?
It's going to be on the runway a little while.
Okay, stop and go.
Centurion 7 Juliet Kilo, number 2, runway 35 left, clear to land.
Number 2, clear to land, 35 left, 7 Juliet Kilo.
Right. So
What do you do?
they have to tell you, are you going to block the runway you just landed on, or are you going to block the runway that's ahead of you? They have to tell you what.
They have to tell you that. So they're either going to tell you.
Green 46, extend up when I will call your crossline.
McGuire with Green 46.
How many seconds have gone by?
Centurion 7 Juliet Kilo, go around on the left side, short cross when approved. Centurion 7 Juliet Kilo, go around on the left side, short cross when approved.
7 Juliet Kilo is bingo fuel.
Centurion 7 Juliet Kilo, caution for the Cessna ahead. Sioux 7, start your departure roll now. Sioux 7, roll now. Sioux 7, roll now. Centurion 7 Juliet Kilo, caution for the Cessna ahead.
7 Juliet Kilo is caution to the aircraft.
What lessons do you take away from that?
Centurion 7 Juliet Kilo, exit at Taxiway Alpha 3 and contact ground.
You talked about
Don't stop long.
You talked about staying on the runway, right? You said you get on the runway and you take your time. Okay? Somebody said, I'm going to wait 2 minutes. Somebody said, I'm going to wait until the airplane clears. I'm just telling you that anytime you're on a runway, whether it's an active runway or an inactive runway, you're on a runway. And you've got to remember that, particularly in this case, with this guy on a stop and go, you know, we talk about situational awareness all the time. Are you all, when you approach an airport, are you trying to capture the situational awareness of the other aircraft that are in the vicinity and what they are doing? What are the other aircraft doing? Are they doing a touch and go? Are they doing a full stop? Are they doing a stop and go? Is there land and hold short operations going on? How does that affect me? How does that affect me? The other thing that frustrates me a little bit about this was, wouldn't it be nice to know if he would have told Tower he was low fuel?
Earlier on.
Earlier. Now the Tower would have said, unable, touch and go's approved, unable, stop and go.
Or he would put the other guy on the other runway.
Okay? So that's important, that you have to relay your situation to the Tower, and then you have to be aware of what's going on around you. Okay, you are holding short when Tower instructs you, November 345 Alpha Juliet, runway 33 shorten, cleared for takeoff. What does shorten mean? Correct answer is the runway length is shortened. Would this surprise you? Why would this surprise you? It would surprise you if you didn't listen to ATIS. It would surprise you if you didn't look at the NOTAMs. It would surprise you if you didn't do your proper pre-flight planning. Then it would surprise you. If Tower tells you 345 Alpha Juliet cleared for takeoff, runway shortened, and you haven't listened to ATIS or you haven't looked at the NOTAMs, how much of the runway is available to you? Are you just going to say, they cleared me for takeoff, it must be okay? What are you going to do?
Ask him how much.
Ask him. Don't be intimidated. Ask him how much runway is available, Tower. Same thing on landing. 345 Alpha Juliet, runway 36, cleared to land, runway shortened. Really? How much? I don't know. I didn't do my planning properly. Tower, how much runway is available? They'll tell you. You've been cleared for takeoff on runway 30, and considering all the visual cues available, what should you do? Quiet. The correct answer is don't take off. Why shouldn't we take off? You've been cleared for takeoff on 30. You're lined up for runway 26.
Got a deal like this.
How could this possibly happen? Right there. That's how it can happen. That's how it can happen. Two thresholds in close proximity to one another. You're taxiing up here on this taxiway. It drives you out onto runway 30. You see the white markings. You continue your taxiway. You know, it just, geometry like this could be possibly confusing, which is a wrong runway departure. And we don't want to do that. Lexington, Kentucky. Okay?
That's 204, Roger. Symbol 900 Juliet, question, symbol 60 Delta, follow suspect head, runway 25 right, clear for the option.
27 right, clear for the option, 6 at 10. Correction, 25 right, clear for the option, 6 at 10.
Listen carefully. Two 6 right, 26 left. Listen carefully.
Whitmore Tower, champ 85537, ready for takeoff and left crosswind departure on 25 right.
Champ 85537, left cross on 25 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff and left crosswind departure, champ 85537.
What just happened? He said that he was He was holding short, ready for takeoff on 25 right. Is he? Yes. What did tower clear him for? 25 left. He said, Roger, cleared for takeoff. Wrong runway departure. What's about ready to happen?
Guy landing, go around.
What's about ready to happen?
What's going on here? Suspect 204, go around.
Go around 204.
Champ, departing 25 right. I thought you were on the left runway. Say your departure request. He said left, did he?
He said left, didn't he? I don't know. I didn't hear him. He said left, didn't he? He said left, didn't he? I don't know. I didn't hear him. Is that an excuse to get on an active runway? If you didn't hear him, say again.
Hold your position till you know.
After receiving clearance, you commence the takeoff roll and notice this visual cue at your windscreen. What should you do? You should abort. Why? You're on a taxiway. Taxiways are yellow, runways are white. You're holding short at Taxiway Charlie. You're the purple airplane. You're on an intersection departure when the tower says 345 Alpha Juliet, runway 36. Line up and wait. 345 Alpha Juliet, runway 36. Line up and wait. What should you do? Why should you advise tower that you're at Taxiway Charlie? Somebody that answered that, can they tell me why?
You're not allowed to do line up and wait at an intersection, so obviously they think you're at the end of the runway.
No, you can line up and wait at an intersection. Let's take a look at this. They could have presumed, because tower said runway 36, line up and wait, tower could have presumed that you are at the end.
Right.
Okay? So let's take a look at an animation where tower presumed that the aircraft was at the end, when in reality, he was given takeoff clearance at the intersection. Okay? And he did not respond to the tower to tell the tower that he was at intersection Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, or Delta. Okay?
When they clear you for an intersection takeoff, aren't they supposed to say cleared for intersection takeoff?
At
Charlie?
Absolutely.
So
and he didn't do that.
he didn't say that.
He didn't say that. So what should you say? Tower, are you talking to me? Is that clearance for me? I'm at Taxiway Charlie. I'm at Charlie. Do you want me to take off? What does that do? Puts his eyes on you. Never be intimidated by air traffic. Because he could think that this guy is you. This guy starts his roll. He says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, cleared for takeoff. Because he thinks you're the black airplane. You say, Roger, you sneak right out here. This green airplane runs right over the top of you. Make sense? That's why it's important when you're doing an intersection departure, always to tell tower the intersection that you're at. And make sure that he understands that, he or she.
Lucy 39 shotgun. Follow the 737 ahead of you, taxi 18 left, the 8 is the Delta.
390 will need 1 minute wait on word from the flight attendant for the cabin. Okay, that's okay. The guy behind him is going to have to wait for you anyway because he's going the other direction. But just follow that 737 when you can. Taxi 1 left.
390 Roger, we have Delta.
Flight 681 for Delta.
So 2681, thank you.
On ground, Pilatus 409 Delta, Romeo with Delta. Out of Wilton, taxi, please wave the wake.
Pilatus 409 Delta Romeo, saw ground, roger. Runway 18 left, expecting intersection departure at Alpha. Hold short of taxiway Romeo on Delta for crossing traffic.
Okay, we'll expect 18 left at Alpha, and we will hold short of Romeo on Delta. Delta Romeo.
Okay, he said he would wave the wake. What does that tell you?
Hawkeye 55, crossing 18 left, turn right on Charlie, hold short of 23.
Hawkeye 18 left, right on Charlie, hold short, 23, Hawkeye 55.
Exit 609, cross runway 18 left, turn right on Charlie, hold short of runway 23.
All right, 18 left will cross right on Charlie, short of 23, exit 609.
Pilatus 9 Delta Romeo, taxi, for an intersection departure, runway 18 left, intersection Alpha.
Taxi, intersection Alpha, 18 left, 9 Delta Romeo.
Hawkeye 55, cross runway 23, taxi full length 18 left, traffic on a 2.5 mile final for 23.
Crossing 23, without delay, Hawkeye 55.
Air Shuttle 2681, follow the regional jet down to the end when he pulls out in front of your taxi full length.
Behind the regional 2681.
46390 be much longer.
No, 390, probably about another 20 seconds, we're calling her now.
Okay, thank you. When you're able, taxi 18 left.
Bye.
Hawkeye 55, Monster Tower 118.1, you have a good day.
You will have a good day, Hawkeye 55. And Bushy 390 is ready for taxi now.
Bushy 390, taxi 18 left, and switch to Tower 118.1, good day.
18 left and Tower 390, thank you.
Blue Street 390, Charlotte Tower, no 18 left, position hold, traffic landing on like 23.
Position and hold, 18 left, Blue Street 390.
Position and hold is now line up and wait.
Charlotte Tower, 12908. Runway 23, clear to land, traffic departing runway 18 left.
Land 23 for Delta Kilo.
Captain 1026, turn right at Foxtrot, contact 9.8 off the runway, traffic might maybe crossing downfield there.
1026, Phoenix Foxtrot.
Captain 1989, heading 180, fighting 180, and contact departure.
180, 1989, switch.
Listen very carefully.
Charlotte Tower, Blue Street 276 with you on the visual T3.
Blue Street 390, 12806, runway 18 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, 18 left, Blue Street 390.
November 409 Delta Romeo, Charlotte Tower, no 18 left, position hold, traffic landing on like 22.
Position and hold, 9 Delta Romeo.
Blue Street 276, Charlotte Tower, roger, continue. Captain 1821, you got Foxtrot?
1821, we'll make Foxtrot.
You will make Foxtrot, roger, turn right there, traffic to crossing the end, contact 9.8 off the runway. I'll cancel takeoff clearance from Blue Street.
Blue Street 390 rejecting 18 left.
Blue Street 390, roger. Just hold there for a moment.
Delta Romeo is going to exit the runway at Delta 6. Tower Brico 3205, chicken and visual 23. Blue Street 390 is ours, we exit Charlie 9.
Charlotte.
Yeah, Blue Street 390, affirmative.
Highly qualified tower operators. Highly qualified pilots. What happened? Intersection departure. Failed to state exactly the location for a lineup and wait. Put the airplane in front of another takeoff airplane. If this guy would have said, I'm at Alpha, would have solved the problem. Because this tower controller thought this guy was that guy. So everything seems to be going correct. Everything seems to be going right. And you see how quickly it can turn. Okay, you've been issued the following clearance. Runway 36 cleared to land, hold short runway 12. If you accept this clearance, what signs should you see at the lasso point? You've been cleared to land runway 36, you're the green airplane, and you've accepted a lasso clearance to hold short of 12. What are you going to see at that point? Correct. Why won't you see this one? Or this one? Excellent.
You're on a runway, not a taxiway.
Here you're on a runway. Here you're on a taxiway. Here you're on a taxiway. Here you're not sure. And this is what it's going to look like. Right there. You've just landed and are at taxi speed. And you notice this marking. What should you do? You should continue your rollout unless you're instructed by air traffic to hold short. What is this marking? What is that marking? Hold short marking. Goes across the runway. When tower gives you clearance to land, you have the whole runway. You have the whole runway unless it's specifically instructed to hold short. So don't let that confuse you like it did to apparently this guy. Okay?
Accept that whole short, do you? It's given to you by
No, you don't have to accept the whole land and hold short. Absolutely not.
Can you change your mind?
Can you change your mind on a land and hold short? Absolutely. They'll probably send you around to get some separation, but sure you can. If you're uncomfortable about a land and hold short, absolutely you can.
It's like you're landing a little long. It's like I'm not going to make.
Sure, if you don't know exactly how much distance it is between your landing point and where you're supposed to stop, yeah, take it around. Tell them, hey, I'm going to decline that, and they'll probably send you around to get some separation. Sure. Okay, following landing on runway 10 right, which is right here, you're the purple airplane, you exit on taxiway Echo, which is this one, because there's the sign that says it's Echo. Without further instruction from the tower, what should you do? You should cross the marking at point A, but stop so not to cross B. Excellent. Very good. When you exit the runway, what does that mean? When you exit the runway, what does that mean?
Your tail has to cross that.
You have to be outside the runway safety.
That's what it means, right there. That's what it means. Not this, but that.
Your tail has to cross the line.
Because if you're this guy here, that runway is not usable. Because you're still inside the runway safety area. Okay? You're exiting the runway and told to hold short runway 21. At what location must you stop? You're told to hold short, runway 21. Correct answer is B. Excellent. 85% got it right. Excellent. This is something that you don't see very often, because you wouldn't expect to see that hold marking as you're exiting on a runway, would you? You would expect to see this one. Correct? So let's take a bigger picture look at this intersection and why is this geometry the way it is. Okay, these two runways, as you can see, are really close to one another. And so Tower wants you to hold at runway 21 because there's the boundary of the runway safety area. If you came up into here, you would be entering the runway safety area.
Kansas City downtown is very similar to that.
That is Kansas City downtown.
I knew it was close.
Okay, so let's take a look at where are you now. You are inside the runway safety area for the runway that you just landed on, and you're outside the runway safety area for 2-1. So this runway, they can't use, can they? Because you're inside the runway safety area. Make sense to you? Okay. The only time you're going to be clear of both of those is right in this area right here, when you finally clear that marking.
But you got to get clearance across the other runway.
Absolutely. You got to get clearance across the other runway. Okay?
They don't always give it to you, but 99% of the time.
No, they better give it to you. Okay. On landing rollout, Tower informs you, left turn on Taxiway Echo. That's a left turn on Echo. We've got to go the long way around tonight because of construction. That's all they tell you. Without further instructions, what should you do after you exit on Echo and clear the runway safety area? That's all they tell you. Stop. Stop. Now, would you contact ground at that point and ask for a progressive? I would probably do that because you're clear of the runway safety area. They haven't given you any further clearance. They didn't tell you to contact ground, did they? Tower was talking to you here. They didn't tell you to, clear Echo and contact ground. They just said, exit at Echo, and that's all they said. Hello? What do you want me to do? I would exit at Echo, I would stop, I would switch to ground control, and I'd say, here I am. What do you want me to do? Because they haven't given you any clearance, right? You don't know what to do. Okay? So you stop, and then go here. Okay, following landing, Tower instructs you to turn right at Delta. Delta's right here, you're the purple airplane. However, on rollout, you realize that you've passed Delta. Now what are you going to do? And the correct answer is inform Tower immediately. 100% we're going to change this question. Okay, so what's the big deal? Why can't you just continue on?
That's the runway. The runway.
But the runway is yours, isn't it?
The cross runway.
Huh?
The other runway. I'm sorry.
Runway's yours. Okay. So you just can't go, how about if you just taxi up to Charlie? How about if you taxi up to, what is that, 3-6? Turn off on 3-6, come down this way. No. Tower wants you to do that. Now, so you tell Tower, hey, I can't do that, I missed it. So correct, inform Tower immediately, because they've got something going on. There's a reason why they want you to exit at Delta. You've been a wonderful audience. Hopefully you've learned something tonight. Once again, don't be intimidated by air traffic. Do not be intimidated by air traffic. If you are confused, like that guy said, remember he said, I thought they told me 25 right, but I wasn't listening and I didn't understand. He gets on 25 left and or right and takes off. You know, my golly, don't do that. If you're confused, if you don't understand what they tell you, ask them again. And if you're still confused, ask them for a progressive taxi. Okay? Anybody else have any questions for me? You've been a great audience. We kept you much longer than we had anticipated. Thanks for coming.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of the taxi test from the FAA's Office of Runway Safety. We'd like to thank Helicopters Incorporated for the use of their facilities here at Spirit of St. Louis Airport. We'd also like to thank the Greater St. Louis Flight Instructors Association for their support in putting on this presentation. If you want to find out more about runway safety, you can check out the FAA's website at www.faa.gov/go/runway safety. On behalf of Tom Frakes and Al Gorthy from the Office of Runway Safety, I'm Phil Dixon from the FAA Safety Team. Please taxi and fly safely.